I know you know Mark Carney. What can you tell us?
Look, he is absolutely the man for the times. He is a brilliant economist. He's handled crises, the global financial crisis when he was Governor of the Bank of Canada. He's handled the Brexit crisis when he was Governor of the Bank of England. He is, and the COVID crisis, I might say as well. So he's really good at handling tough times. He's a mighty intellect, very successful businessman, and yeah, look, let me put it this way. If anybody else was Prime Minister of Canada at the moment, they would want to hire Mark Carney to advise them. That's how good he is. So I think that he's absolutely the right guy. And what he's demonstrated is the way to deal with Donald Trump is to stand up to him and not to suck up to him, as so many people have advised. You know, he's stood up to him. The Canadian people have backed him. And there he is. He's elected Prime Minister in these extraordinary turnaround, as you said.
It is an extraordinary turnaround, and after an old government, right? I mean, Justin Trudeau was obviously on the nose, and things really changed. But is this really just a reaction to Donald Trump? Is that ultimately what made this happen? Because clearly the Conservatives were on the ascendancy.
Look, there's no doubt, without Trump and without a change of leader, the Liberals, who are the centre-left party in Canada, would have been pretty much wiped out. But, Trump's extraordinary bullying of Canada, the economic coercion, saying that they should be the 51st state, saying the border is fictional, this is all wild stuff. And he was repeating it today. And so Canadians have stood up. I mean, but think about this. And, when we think about what is not being discussed in our election, Patricia, think about this. This is what Carney has said. He has said the old relationship with America of greater integration of the economy and security is over. American global leadership is over. Now, he is a very sober, somewhat dour man. He's not given to flamboyance. So, we haven't been talking about that. We've been talking about whether people have fallen or stumbled off stages and, all sorts of other trivia. These are wild times in Australia, in the world, and that's really what we should be focused on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was talking to Scott Ryan, one of your old ministers, a little earlier, who obviously became a Canadian High Commissioner and has returned now.
He was effectively our ambassador to Canada.
Yeah, but I'm not allowed to call it that because we're part of the Commonwealth, which is an important. He was just talking about the dynamic in Canada being more visceral than it even is here. The anti-Trump sentiment, the way that actually everywhere it's kind of in the psyche of Canadians at the moment. And in some ways, I mean, the Conservatives are also talking a bit tough on Trump, weren't they, in Canada? But it didn't seem to cut it.
I think Poilievre's problem was, for a start, he was not nearly as well qualified as Carney. I mean, he's a young guy, but who's been in his 40s, who got into Parliament when he was in his 20s. He's never done anything else. But he's a very good politician and probably a much more colourful and, flamboyant speaker than Carney, for sure. But the difficulty is that Poilievre was channeling a lot of that Trump style, and he was living to some extent in the same right-wing, populist media ecosystem. And so he was seen as being somewhat of a mini Trump, and he would use similar lines to Trump. And, so that's that. And, basically one of Carney's best lines against Poilievre was to say, someone who worships at the altar of Donald Trump is not going to be able to stand up to him.
Yeah. Just finally, we're in our final week of the election. I have to ask you, we've had a few different entry points into this campaign. Even welcome to country ceremonies started getting discussed. What did you make of that?
Well, I think it's just a diversion. It is, I mean, this is, Peter Dutton is going to things that, that activate his base, that play well on Sky News and, 2GB and that sort of right-wing media system, where he has drawn a lot of his inspiration and ideas, and unfortunately for him, they've played out, poorly, I would say, in the general electorate. Look, I think the position with welcomes to country, acknowledgements of country, it's a matter for every organisation. If this RSL wants to do it, fine. If this RSL doesn't want to do it, fine. It's not compulsory. And, you know, the idea that you would make, I mean, think about this, think about the other alternative. Let's say the Prime Minister for Australia were to say, no one is to do an acknowledgement of country. People would be outraged. And so that's why it's just, it is really, it's fine. What the government should be doing is saying, well, you know, they should decide where they want to have welcomes to country and acknowledgements of country. Opening of Parliament is obviously appropriate, but on other occasions, leave it for people and organisations to make up their own minds. So this is just pure, I think, look, maybe this will work for him in some areas, but it is just pure culture war stuff. And I think it turns a lot of people off. I think it's a mistake to go down that route myself.